Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating, albeit highly theoretical proposal, the $1 million promise of early childhood education. We're going to neutrally examine a radical idea. What if we could take something incredibly local, like a toddler hitting their preschool milestones, and literally turn that into a massive financial asset used to pay down the national debt? We're talking about a system that proposes connecting the foundational development of children directly into the deepest financial plumbing of the US Federal Reserve. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be going step by step through the vicious cycle, creating brain gold, looking at that $1 million promise, the Fed next backstop, trillion-dollar coin mechanics, and finally, the ultimate constraint. Starting with Section 1, the vicious cycle, a societal crisis in need of a solution. To understand this proposed financial fix, we first have to wrap our heads around the deep systemic problem it's trying to solve. This source material leans into this really powerful idea from the 1997 book, The Fourth Turning. It basically argues that we're stuck in a massive vicious loop. You can't fix crime without fixing the family, and you can't fix families without fixing welfare and our budgets. The sources argue we're in deep denial about where this cycle actually begins, which is in those critical first few years of a child's life. Moving right along to Section 2, creating brain gold, a new way to value early education. To break this vicious cycle, the proposal introduces a completely new framework for valuing children's minds. So the big idea here is that early cognitive development isn't just a nice societal benefit. In this theoretical model, it's actually a monetizable asset called brain gold. And the sources are very specific about this. Brain gold refers to the actual physical synaptic closings in the brains of 3 to 6-year-olds. We're talking about the biological wiring for language, math, and positive expectations. The argument is that this physical development creates immense, measurable future economic value through things like higher productivity, better employment, and drastically reduced social costs down the road. To actually monetize this brain gold, the proposal relies on private sector aggregators. Think of it kind of like how Wall Street bundles mortgages. These private entities would bundle up individual loans made to parents for high-quality early childhood education. They'd package these costs into a unique theoretical security called a USAValuesDebitBond. Basically, this bond is backed by the resulting brain gold, the proven future economic returns of those well-educated kids. This brings us to Section 3. The $1 million ECE promise, and the transformation of value. Now, this right here is where the financial math gets wild as we move from the upfront cost to the future economic output. Let's look at the baseline cost first. According to the data in our sources, top-tier private sector preschool, say in a place like Minnesota, runs about $1,400 a month. Over 3 years, that totals roughly $54,000. This is the hard upfront cost of providing that solid developmental foundation in the private sector without cutting any regulatory corners. But here is where the value absolutely transforms. The proposed market value of that child's future outcomes, it shoots up to $1 million per individual. And this isn't just a made-up number. Private markets, life insurers, and economists already calculate this kind of stuff. The present value of future earnings from a high-quality pre-K education can exceed $1 million through higher wages, greater productivity, and lower government spending later on. So for taxpayers and policymakers, this framework says early education isn't a sunk cost at all. It's literally $1 million investment yielding very real returns. Let's move to Section 4, the Fed next backstop, connecting the financial plumbing. How exactly does this bridge connect a local preschool directly to the US Federal Reserve? Well, through a proposed monetary policy tool called FedNext. Let's trace how this liquidity actually flows. Step 1. A private aggregator, what the sources call a Regional Reserve Finance Corporation, or RRFC, packages up these parent loans. Factoring in a markup for packaging, that $54,000 education might cost about $72,000 to bundle into a USAValuesDebitBond. Step 2. The private sector sells this bond to the Federal Reserve at that strict $72,000 cost price. The Fed uses its reserve creation powers to buy it, providing instant liquidity. Then, Step 3. The Fed holds onto the bond and essentially gifts its value over to the US Treasury, which is actually pretty similar to how the Fed remits its profits to the Treasury today. Section 5. Trillion-dollar coin mechanics, monetizing the asset. Once the Treasury has these gifted bonds, the proposal outlines a really unconventional mechanism to convert them into usable currency. You've probably heard chatter about a trillion-dollar coin during those tense debt ceiling debates, right? Where a platinum coin is minted and deposited at the Fed. Well, the sources outline a really intriguing variant here. Unlike the standard concept, this version keeps the coin at the Treasury. It acts as an accounting asset, utilizing those USA values debit bonds, the brain gold, as a real-world economic rationale to justify the coin's massive valuation. So to execute the actual debt reduction, the Treasury steps in. Step 1, they mark up that $72,000 gifted bond straight to its true $1 million economic market value. Step 2, to turn that value into usable money without relying on the Fed, the Treasury issues historical Greenback Dollars. These are direct US Treasury obligations, not Federal Reserve notes. And Step 3, the Treasury uses these newly printed greenbacks strictly to pay down existing federal debt. The sources argue this prevents middle-class inflation because the new money is tied to real future productivity and just replaces existing debt instead of funding new spending. Finally, Section 6, the ultimate constraint, a reality check on the law and human nature. We've walked through all this theoretical financial plumbing, but before we call it a day, we have to ask, can any of this actually be done under current U.S. law? Okay, we have to take an honest, impartial look at the legality here. Bundling loans in the private sector? Fully possible. That's just normal Wall Street activity. The Fed buying those packaged consumer loans? Also possible. And there's actually precedent with crisis-era programs like TALF. However, the Treasury suddenly marking up an asset to $1 million based on future projections, that is not currently allowed under federal accounting rules. That would require some major new legislation. And issuing greenbacks at a multi-trillion-dollar scale, that would absolutely require brand new legal authority from Congress. But here's where the sources make a really fascinating philosophical pivot. They argue that even if we changed the laws and completely opened up those financial liquidity gates, the true bottleneck shifts entirely. The binding constraint is literally no longer money. It becomes the human element at the local level, individual, private sector kindness and character. Because at the end of the day, Wall Street and the Federal Reserve, they can't build brain gold. That requires local moms, mentors, and providers consistently showing up. It demands adults actively modeling core values like compassion, courage, and honesty, and delivering repeated messages of kindness to children ages 0 to 6. This can only scale organically, county by county, driven entirely by the dedication of local communities. In this model, the financing merely follows the character. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought regarding this whole $1 million promise of early childhood education. If these theoretical financial mechanisms were actually put in place and the money was truly there without question, do our communities actually have the individual kindness, consistency, and character to execute this, county by county, to save the nation's balance sheet? Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me. Keep asking questions and keep learning.